Alright, I'm Greg from Kaivac Tech Support. I'm going to do a little video today to show you guys how to do some maintenance to your pump. We got a 500 psi pump from a 1750 here. The pump in the 1750, 2150, and 1250 are the same pump. There's slight configuration differences, mostly with your fittings. So today we're just going to show you how to do some basic maintenance. So we've already taken the pump from the 1750. If you're not sure how to do that, have a look at our video that shows how to replace a pump from the 1750. But we've already got this one out. So what you're going to need is a 3/16 Allen wrench. There are 4 bolts. They're Allen head bolts that hold the pump to the motor. We're going to need to remove those. Once we got those, you can see on the other side there's 2 more, the same ones. Now what these do is they hold the manifold onto the packing boxes of the pump. So before I get started, I always like to take a marker. This is a paint marker. If you don't have one, you can actually use a piece of masking tape, and you're basically just going to have it coming across your pump, your motor. So I'll just make a line right here, come across and down. And what that will do is it'll make sure that I'm putting it on there when I go to put it back together again, that I don't mix anything up. So just a quick line, like I said, masking tape would work. Once I've got it marked, I'm going to stand it up here so I can work. I'm going to take my Allen wrench and remove these 4 bolts. All right, now we got the bolts out. We can separate the pump head from the motor. Now, if you can see this here, it's got a lot of grease inside of there. That's pretty good right there. That's actually what you're looking for. Nice black, high temp bearing grease is what you want to use. Now, I'm going to clean this off here in a minute, but when you go to put this back on, make sure you put some grease in there. Now, if you end up doing a rebuild kit, there is some grease that comes with the rebuild kit. So when you go to put this thing back together again, make sure you're putting some grease in there. High temp black grease, black bearing grease does the job. There's also some moly grease that you could use. Just has to be high temp. So now that we've gotten that apart, we're going to go to our pump head here. Let me get this cleaned up a little bit so we can work. And we're back. So if you want to come in here and have a look here. Now I've got the regulator disconnected here, so there's no pressure here. So if you are trying to troubleshoot, this is what you want here. You should be able to move this back and forth with your thumb. It's relatively easy. Now, if that's not moving back and forth, you might have something going on with your seals. It might be bound down. Now, you can also look here. If that looks like you got like, it kind of looks like varnish, and what that is telling you is that somebody's ran that dry and your seals are burnt up. You might be able to see it on this side, but this one here looks pretty good actually. Now that black bearing grease also, I should have mentioned, you got, if you were to open that up and that grease was to look brown and creamy, kind of like an emulsified grease, that might mean that your seals are bad. If the grease is hard and crusty, you got some dirt in there, clean that all out and use some fresh grease. while you're doing your rebuild. So really that's keeping a little bit of grease in there is about the only maintenance you need to do with the pump. So what we're going to do now though is we are going to take this thing apart and show you how to do a rebuild. Alright, so we're going to take these Allen bolts off here. Once you break the thread, they come out pretty easy. Then we will just kind of pivot this down. Now if you look inside of here, you can see some really nasty stuff going on in there. Some rust, some other corrosion. So I'm not really sure what they did with this pump here. And you look, even your check valves in there have some serious corrosion going on. So we're going to pop those out and replace them. The seals and the shaft look pretty good, but you know, if I've got that kind of damage going on with the pump, I think you're better off to go ahead and just do a complete rebuild, so you're not back in there a couple months later to replace the seals. Now, maybe you're getting in your pump because when you were going to prime your machine, you couldn't get it to prime because somebody had ran it without a filter, or maybe you got low pressure and you couldn't get that resolved because somebody ran it without a filter. So what happens is that debris gets in there and it gets in these little check valves. So if you need to get in there just to clean these check valves, this is really all you need to do. Most of the time they're not going to be this dirty. But to just pop them out one at a time, make a note of which direction they're facing. Just use your nail, and then you can come in through this side. You see it's spring loaded from this side. And just look for any debris that might be caught in there. Do them one at a time. Take your O-ring, put it on the outside of the seal. There should be a little Teflon ring in here. It's in there, I just am having a hard time getting it out. Oh, there she went. So pay attention to these Teflon rings. If for some reason you're having them, they're having a hard time staying in there when you go to put it back together again, you can actually put a little bit of grease on them and rub all over them, and then they'll stay in there. So just take out each valve, inspect it really good, and then put it back in facing the same difference or same direction. So as we're looking at this now, the two on the bottom had the X's, the crosses facing out. So we'll take that one out, then we'll move over to this one. Check it. I wouldn't use anything sharp here because you'll mess up the O-rings. Now, before I would put these back in, if I was going to reuse them, I would clean them off. So again, make sure your Teflon's in there. It is. Put the O-ring around it. Make sure you put it back in facing the same direction. So that's if you're just cleaning the valves. But if you're replacing them, there is a rebuild kit available. You get the new Teflon seats. There is 8 of those in there, one on each side of each one of these 4 valves. There's 4 valves, and there are 4 O-rings in there, and a little bit of lubrication. Again, the lubrication is mostly used on these to put on these Teflon seats. It just helps hold them in place when you go to put the pump back together. All right, so if you're doing a complete rebuild, or maybe you just need to replace the seals, like I said, if this plunger gets like a varnish to it from overheating, it will actually just rip apart those seals and makes it worse and worse and worse. But the packing boxes just pop apart. there's this little metal retainer in here that holds the seals in place, and just kind of push that out of the way. Now there's where your seals are, and what I like to do is just take them all out in one shot. That way I know the order, okay? So you got this brown Viton seal at the top, followed by 2 of these black seals. Then there is the, it's called a spreader. It's basically a V shape, hard to see in the video, that fits into the back side of these seals. All these seals fit into each other into this V-shaped ring. And then behind that is a spring washer. It's kind of a wavy washer. I'm not sure if you can see that there. And then another piece of Teflon behind that. So when you get your new seal kit out, you're actually going to just build them up just like that, stack them up on top of each other. Start with your piece of Teflon, then you take your wavy washer on top of that, then your spreader, then your 2 black seals, and then the brown one goes on top of that. And then you will just drop it right back down in there. Now again, you can put a little grease on that Teflon. Now sometimes some people will actually grease these up, but because I greased the shaft before I put it back in there, I don't think that's really necessary. You just push them down, slide the retaining clip back in, and then that one is done. So then you do the same thing to the other side and lay it up here. Go ahead and put it back in there. Now if you're going to replace the plunger, you can go ahead and put that in. Before you put that in, take your grease, smear a little grease on there, just from about here down, and then do the same to this side. Then you're going to put that in, your new one, and then you work the other side. So go ahead and put this one back together again. And then you would do the same thing to this side. Just push that retaining clip out of the way, pull the seals out. So I like to pull them all out in one shot. You got them in the order they need to be. You can set that somewhere for reference. Then you just build that, pop it in there, metal clip back, and put it back together again. You are good to go. Alright, the seal and plunger, that is pump kit A. The poppet valves, O-rings, that is pump kit B. And then the final is pump kit C. And what that is this eccentric bearing. It's kind of an off-centered hole on it, which basically moves that plunger back and forth as that spins on the pump. Now you can see there's a little Allen wrench hole right here. Now what that's for is actually taking it off and putting it back on again. So what I like to do, and this is the way I do it, and I've had pretty good success. There's other people that do it differently, but I like to put that little hole on here at about 9 o'clock. And then I'll take the short end of the Allen wrench and put it in there, and then I'll try to have that also pointing at about 9 o'clock. Then I will take a hammer and just come straight down on it, and usually it pops right off. So as you can see, it's not too difficult. Just bring it right off and put the new one on. This one actually isn't in too bad a shape. We'll go ahead and leave it on. Now, don't worry about if it can't go all the way on there. When you turn the pump on, it'll actually tighten itself up. You just need to kind of get it on there as best you can. So one's a little dirty. Probably should have cleaned that off too. So get that on there the best you can. Now, when you go, put it up this way. When you go to put the new, if you're putting a new pump head on there, you would go ahead and put that on now, or your rebuild pump, or even the pump that you just took apart to clean. Before you put it back on, now we've already used some grease in here on the seals and on the plunger. Now you also need to put some black high temp bearing grease on this bearing. And you just take your Zerk gun or your grease, and I normally just make an X right on the fitting here with the bearing grease before I put my pump back on there. And then your rebuild is done and it's ready to install back on your pump. Again, you know, I showed you how to line up your lines. Just want to line that up. We're going to take our 2 bolts, get them hand tight, take your Allen wrench, snug them up. Now, if you got a little of the blue Loctite around, you can put a little bit of blue Loctite just on the tips of those threads, just about a drop. Don't use the permanent in case you got to take it off again. So I've lined up my line between the packing boxes and the manifold, and then I'm going to line the line up from my pump motor to my pump. So I know I've got this thing, you may need to mess with this a little bit, fit. So you drop your bolts in, wiggle it around a little bit. Tighten those all back up. Work your way around. Do a little diagonal thing going here. Hit them all one more time after you think you got it tight, just in case. And you're going to connect your regulator and bring it around. Nylon tie strap it to your motor if needed, depending on which model you're working on. And then you are ready to reinstall your newly rebuilt or cleaned pump head.